Unfortunately, I have to cut this tire off. See, this other rim side is just absolutely jam solid. Nightmare. That is just, I've never come across a wheel that glued to a frame before. Just goodbye. Good. Right, let's fight with the back wheel now. Right, this one was a lot easier. It looks like this is a tubeless rim, and I'm not a bit confused. I don't know that much about wheels, but this is a tubeless, very hard. Anyway, that's an absolute nightmare. I think there's some restoration channels where, because that looks that way, this will just be replaced, and I think that's silly. See what I mean? Cleaned up, it's perfect. There was a repair I had to make. This was cracked here, and there was a big dent in this area, so obviously something hit it. Yeah, now it's good to go. This one was filled with epoxy or something. Very bizarre. It's a loose bolt. Maybe with a longer one we'll get in further. So the way I've solved this one is I found a longer bolt, as the standard bolt would obviously stop at the thread early and is stripped through. Now I could helicoil this, but when I cleared it through, there was still quite a lot of travel through down inside. Now, considering there's this many bolts around here, I've just screwed this down super tight, so certainly a torque tight. So I'm going to cut this bolt down. It'll give me this distance shorter, and that should bed this problem out, so that'll solve that problem. Yeah, it's coming on nicely. I've got this all blasted off now. It's still got some dirt bits on it, but those are bits that are clean by hand, but at least I got rid of the main bunch of grime, and then we'll get it ready for paint. Right, today we're going to look at the Guzzi's shocks, front shocks. We're going to replace the seals. The process is very simple on these. You have a screw in there, a bolt in there, sorry, and you have a wheel axle clamp bolt there, which got to come out. That's kind of not a lot of oil in this shock. All obviously drained out over time. There are two seals in here, and you just prise them out with a screwdriver. They can be quite stiff if they're old, but you've just got to put something to protect the edge. Stick the screwdriver in, pop the first one out, and then pop the second one out. It's quite simple. So I'll just kind of order those seals, and I'll fit them in for you. But that's very, very simple. In fact, you don't even have to take this end cap off. Okay, you just unscrew it that side and it comes out. Very easy. Right, one other thing you want to do is you want to check for pitting, that the seal needs to seal against something smooth, right? But it can't have any deep scars or any rust pitting in, because then you're just going to get oil seeping past the seal. Also, another thing to do is check the length of the spring compared to the other one. So now we have this parallel recess back again, which is sitting a little tight here now. That's okay. It will start to smooth out. So let me get that in with two hands. Tiny bit of play down there. But I mean, that's going to be a very nice positive grip now. Okay, I'm going to sandblast these because they're so mucky. One of these is jammed. These came out really well. They're this is anodized aluminium. So underneath the horrible paint was a fairly good condition brake pads. I'm quite surprised actually. They look very good. I don't really want to mess with that too much. The problem with putting paint onto aluminium is it just doesn't last. That's why they anodize them. Anodizing is a form of dye that it's a chemical process which stains the outer surface of the aluminium. It's very popular on bicycles, etc. So so let me open these up and get those chambers cleaned, make sure that they're all operating properly. So here's the problem we have, is these two plungers. They sit inside a sleeve. It's properly jammed. They should move independently and come in, so both sides need to be somehow removed. So for those of you who have Brembo brakes or any brakes where you can't get these shoes out, I've figured out a way to do it. What I do is because I can't pull them out because they're so solid inside, there is possibly still some movement in. And once it's been soaking for a few days, what I'll do is I'll just put some spray in there and then compress it in the vise with a wooden block. Please use a wooden block. You don't want to damage the facer. You're going to stick it on there, and then on the corner of the chuck, or the jaw of the vise, you compress it. Just be careful as you compress, that stuff sprays out. It hit me in the face and I had to go and wash my face off. So it is fairly high pressure once you compress that. But at least that'll get some movement, and then you can spray some more penetrant in there. And then with 2 screwdrivers, there's a little lip on each side. You can put the screwdrivers in, lever against these two edges. It's not a critical area, and just slowly you will see it moving, and then it'll most likely stop. Then just repeat the process and repeat the process. It'll just get a little bit looser, and as you saw the previous one, whoops, it pops out, and you can carry on, because these things are 300 plus pounds, because I think they've just got Brembo written on them. So yeah, let's go and do that now. Well, I finally got it moving, and I thought I'd better video this before this part comes out so we can see it together. So it is coming. As you can see, it's had a hard life. There's this caliper. Wow. The next thing we do is get these seals out, because what happens is, 2 things happen with these seals. Stuff gets in and turns them into that rusty pile, and worse off, stuff comes out, and that's where you get brakes that don't work properly, because you get air pockets and you get fluid drop, and that's because it's coming out of the pad. So it's fairly basic stuff. I've got 400, which should be more than enough. That's about as good as you're going to get it. Okay, well, I'm going to work with that. And the thing is, if these are worn beyond use, then we haven't lost anything. We just replace them with new ones, and that you can do after the restoration. So I'm going to do my best to try and save my client as much money as I can, because that's what I promised I would do. So we're going to get some new rubbers. We're going to see if these work. I might as well wet them up now. Right, this is the state of play. This bolt will not come out for love nor money. I've heated this extensively. I'm not quite sure what I'm going to do. I managed to get the caliper to move slightly. I've just got to figure a way. The only thing I can do now is to... And we're trying to get one bolt off, and it's...
I think there's something else. We need aluminium too.
Yeah, baby. Thank you. Have you sprayed anything? Or we're going to have to put a heavy coil in. We'll see. Really nice detail on this bolt, actually. So here's one of the quirks of the Mk1. The issue with having an oil filter on the inside of the sump is fairly obvious to me anyway, is that every time you have to do a service and take these out and you don't torque these to the right setting, you start to strip out these bolts. Now, what's happened here is this one here is stripped, okay? And not only is it stripped, but I also found bits of helicoil in here. I've got a helicoil system here, but the thread is, again, different to this. For what reason, I don't know. What I'm doing here is I've cut one of these bolts down and I've lengthened the bolt. So I'm busy doing that here now. So what I'm going to do is add on about that much more. Okay, there's the extended bolt. I'm going to bring it down. Okay. Oh yes. So this is officially the start of the actual rebuild. The sump is on, new oil filter in. As I said before, didn't helicoil, but extended the threads of the bolts. Those have all worked. That was broken off, that was stripped. This one is semi-stripped. Yeah, a bit of a mess down here, I've got to be honest. But I'm a little bit reticent to put helicoils in these tiny little narrow spaces. There's not a lot of meat on these bits, so if I can get an extension on a thread, I'd rather do that. So that seems to have worked out okay, thank goodness. So now we'll get down and start with get these cylinders back in again. putting the piston back in again, putting the gudgeon pin in. On this particular motorcycle, it stresses that you have to heat the piston up so that the gudgeon pin will move, because it is an incredibly stiff gudgeon pin. So I have my little homemade system here where I have a threaded piece of M8, I think, probably something like that, and a rubber or a hard plastic front so I don't damage the piston, and then a puller. And all I do is tighten this end, which will pull the gudgeon pin in. What you don't want to do is try and hit that gudgeon pin in while this piston is on the conrod, because you'll just put an incredible amount of stress on that big end bearing, etc., and do a lot more damage. There you can see how my thumb is touching that flange there, and the one on that side, that's where you want to heat. You can get access with a bent nozzle flame, and you want to heat it for about a minute or so, not much more, and it should go in fairly simply. So make sure you put oil on the small end, because you want to give it some lubrication while the oil is still getting around to these parts. You don't want them to dry out. Okay, on these piston rings, they're kind enough to tell you top. It's always a good practice to have the gaps opposite each other. Don't expect those rings to stay in those positions, right? They're not going to stay there, but they will settle down eventually. But if they can settle down opposite each other, the best. What you don't want is oil dripping down onto the cylinder through these areas. So you imagine oil cavitating up here and then slipping down these ridges down and filling up the base. I'm just going to put under a little bit of tension, not much. I just want to make sure that my assembly is correct. That's probably one of the reasons why this thing was running like a mare and probably losing compression. So we'll get that down to 0.22 mil. Turn the flywheel until on the compression stroke until it wants to drop. So it's right on the top dead center. And if it's on the top dead center on the compression stroke, then it would make sense that all the valves are closed for the explosion to take place, so no air escapes on that particular stroke. So that means that the valve clearances will be at their largest. So yeah, close this down. Don't tighten it up too much. Bring that down just a little bit more. Remember, you've got to do this on a cold engine. Cold. No, too much. That feels great. Okay. But that's the way it's supposed to be, because when this heats up, these rods will adjust. When you first hear one of these engines, they sound a bit noisy as they warm up. These will extend, start to swell up, and then close that gap a little bit more. But by 0.22 mils gives it the flexibility that it needs. So that what it's not doing is pushing the valve open constantly, because if that happens, then air is escaping. Very important. One cylinder done. Tomorrow I put in the rings on this one, and then I'm hopefully we'll have a solution for the head with the fins. I've had to order a aluminium welder extension for the MiG, so we'll see if that works. I'm also going to try to drill out this hole, so we'll see how we go.